John, and all the others who are here today, the directors of the National Rifle Association, friends. You know, there are gatherings like this taking place all over this great country today, because the one thing we know is that the American people have a hell of a lot more sense than our politicians. You know, I like to get to Delaware once in a while because I used to think that this must be a really weird place. I mean, after all, Joe Biden comes from Delaware.
Oh, nice.
But then I realized it's not so much that he lives or lived in Delaware, it's that he lives in his own mind.
Oh, nice. About 7 miles from my house.
You know, the president, for some odd reason, asked him to head this task force, and he met with everybody, he said. And they said before the meetings that the vice president is entering these meetings with an open mind. And while I must say that we were skeptical, we nonetheless sent our federal affairs director to meet with the vice president and others. And the open-minded vice president announced during the course of the meeting that, of course, he and the president had very strong feelings about firearms, and that nothing was going to dissuade them from what they felt was necessary to do about firearms. When he was quoted to that effect, something he'd said in front of 40 people, a newsman said, well, I checked with the vice president's office and they said the vice president never said that. In most of America, that's called a lie. In Washington, everyone just shrugged and said, well, that's just Joe. So it's good to be in Delaware and know that Delaware is a part of America and not a part of Joe Biden's fantasy world. For the last year or so, we've been warning that this day was coming. We've been warning that if Barack Obama were reelected, that he was going to pursue his lifelong opposition to the Second Amendment. During the campaign, he said, the Second Amendment, I support the Second Amendment.
He's a liar, too.
I would never come for your guns. I would never take your rifles. I would never take your shotguns. I would never take your sidearms. Chris Matthews, one of his media lapdogs, said in the course of the campaign that Wayne LaPierre, our executive vice president, was insane if he thought that Barack Obama would threaten the gun rights of America's citizens. And then Newtown happened, and the machine that had been prepared swung into action, because now they had what they thought would be the catalyst to change the American people's views on firearms and on the Second Amendment. It didn't take long, and they all came together. And the president said, I still believe in the Second Amendment, but I just think we ought to have common sense restrictions, like you shouldn't have guns. If you watched his speech, it was quintessential Obama. The president stood up there, the most reasonable man in America, with a common sense solution to the problem, as he stood up when any other problem is confronted it, as the most reasonable man in America, with a common sense solution to the problem, and told us that Americans would rally to his solution, except that there are those out there who are evil, who are bad, who for nefarious reasons and greed oppose what it is he wants to do. This time, it was the National Rifle Association. Well, let me tell you something. All of us here do have a special interest. We have a special interest in the Constitution of the United States. We have a special interest in the Second Amendment of that We have a special interest in the freedoms that have been bequeathed to us by the founders and those who've defended them over 200 years. And we have a special interest in passing the values that have been bequeathed to us down to the next generation and the generations that follow. In the history of this country, Americans who are not, by and large, obsessed with politics, and shouldn't be, but Americans have risen to every challenge to the fundamental values upon which this nation was founded that they've confronted. Sometimes that challenge has been from abroad, and we have people here today who've served and fought and given blood to meet those challenges. Sometimes the challenge is here at home. And all of you here are testimony to the fact that when we confront such a challenge, we as Americans stand up. We stand up. We stand up in a united way and we say, no, you shall not take the freedoms bequeathed to us from us. We will go to the ballot box. We will go to our legislators. We will write letters. We will make phone calls. We will demonstrate. We will organize. We will do everything it is necessary to do to protect those rights and to protect the values that we share. The president's opponent, the president's obstacle in achieving his ideological agenda is not the National Rifle Association. It's you and millions of other Americans just like you who may be NRA members or may not be NRA members, but know what this country is about and are willing to defend it. Our strength comes not from the fact that we're a special interest. It comes from the fact that we're Republicans and Democrats and independents and factory owners and factory workers, police officers, military people, shopkeepers, small business owners, union members. It comes from the fact that we're Americans who understand what America is about, has been about, and if we have anything to do about it, will be about for generations to come. The president can issue executive orders, he can give speeches, he can use our children to advance an ideological agenda while ignoring steps that might be taken to actually protect them. But there are a few obstacles that he's going to have to overcome. Things like the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Things like facts and empirical evidence. Things that Congress and other legislatures will consider and will debate. You know, we've been through this debate before. I was on a national television program last week, and the anchor, I won't name him, probably call me names anyway, but he said, you know, my producer said, why don't we just get the file from the 1990s and pull it out, because haven't we been here before? Haven't we been through this same debate? Yes, we have. We debated it, we discussed it, we looked at the evidence. The evidence was clear, we tried things, we saw what worked, we saw what didn't work, we rejected what didn't work, and now we're looking at it all again. And in the wake of Newtown,
Can you hold that for me for a minute?
did the president put together a task force to protect the kids? No. He put together a task force and said, what do we do about guns? That's a different question. Because protecting our children and taking our guns are not the same. It was a coincidence, but the morning after the Newtown shootings, I found myself in Israel touring a facility where they trained armed security to protect their schools. When I got back and we suggested that perhaps armed security might be an answer, we were told that we were insane. And my question was this: why, when the Israelis did that make sense? And why, when Bill Clinton proposed that perhaps armed security was needed in our schools, was that reasonable? And why, when Charles Schumer took the first grant under Bill Clinton's program to provide armed security in some of New York's schools, was that sensible? And why, when Nancy Pelosi took one of the first grants and one of the largest for armed security in San Francisco schools, was that common sense? And why were all of those things common sense, reasonable, and legitimate, and when we suggested that other children ought to be protected, that was insane? The president, looking at the polls, then decided, well, maybe they've got a point here, because it seems that most people are more interested in school security than they are in taking your guns. And so in his speech, he suggested he's going to beef up this program. He's going to add 1,000 school resource officers. You know how many schools there are in this country? 135,000. 30,000 of them have security, 105,000 don't. And he's going to fix it with 1,000 school resource officers. That's a great idea. That's called a fig leaf. The other problem that we haven't even been willing to deal with that could make a difference is our broken mental health system. Almost all these shooters have been severely mentally ill. Did you know that in our prisons today, in every single state, not in most states, not in some states, in every single state, there are more people who've been diagnosed as severely mentally ill than there are in those states' private and public mental health facilities. We destroyed our mental health system. We locked these people up like criminals where they get worse, and then we put them out on the street where on occasion they blow and threaten the lives of their families and of others. And that's what's happened time and again. The president's going to study that. I think that's good, don't you? In 1993, Wayne LaPierre, our executive vice president, appeared on Face the Nation with then Congressman Charles Schumer. And Wayne said that the problem we face is a mental health care system that doesn't work. And we at the NRA believe that those people who've been adjudicated to be potentially dangerously mentally ill should be included in the NICS system, so that when they try and buy a firearm, they'll be turned down. Chuck Schumer said, I can agree with that. The two of them got up and shook hands, and he said, I'll help you get that done. That was 1993. Nothing's been done. And now the president's going to solve the problem by reinstituting and readapting laws that have been tried before and don't work. Now that's a good idea, isn't it? Well, I can tell you he's not going to do that if you have anything to say about it. He's not going to do that if gun owners and Second Amendment believers around this country have anything to say about it. And by God, he's not going to do it if I have anything to say about it. The fact is that he and his friends don't get it. Last week a poll came out and asked people what the primary purpose of the Second Amendment was. 65% of Americans, both parties, all persuasions, said the primary purpose of the Second Amendment is to protect the American people from tyranny. That's what it's about. Not too many years ago in Moscow, a banquet was held honoring General Kalashnikov, the man who in World War II invented the AK-47. General Kalashnikov today is 93 years old. At that time he was 85 years old, and one of the few heroes that Russia has. As the dinner came to a conclusion, the main toast was given by President Putin. He finished the toast, and the general stood up, held up his glass in front of Putin's face and said, Mr. President, I dream of a country like the United States, governed by men and women not afraid of an armed citizenry. Yes. Think about it. We live in that country. A country that most people in the world can only dream about. You and I have a challenge, and that's to make sure that our children and our grandchildren are going to continue to live in the kind of country that our founders gave us. Thank you very much.